The Sunday Papers on Off the Ball.
And you're welcome back to Off the Ball here on News Talk. John Duggan with you through until 7, sitting in for Joe Malloy today. Time now for the Sunday Paper Review. We're delighted to be joined by the Virgin Media broadcaster Tommy Martin and the Irish Independent sports writer Michael Verney. Donegal and Offaly's finest here on a Sunday. How are you both?
That's a novel pairing.
Yeah, I don't
Very
think
novel, yeah. Good, John.
I don't think there's been an All-Ireland final between Donegal and Offaly. There might have been a semi-final somewhere along the road, but I don't know.
John, we can count on one hand the amount that we've been in. So no, there definitely hasn't been on my count anyway.
Yeah,
same for us. Our eras were very fleeting and never came at the same time. So
yeah, and this Donegal hurling's not really at the pitch yet of Offaly hurling. But great to see you, great to hear you. For anybody, you can listen on News Talk and you can watch the lads on the digital and social channels for Periscope and Twitter at Off the Ball, YouTube, Facebook, and the OTB Sports app. So great to have you for the next hour and a half to, I suppose, talk about the night before. I suppose that's the best place to start after we go through the back pages. This is the Sun. If you can see it there, yeah, you can. Just drawful. So I'll just move that across a little bit more. Just drawful. Duffy goals saves Gaffer Kenny. Another hard defeat. Fans boo as World Cup bid is crushed in stalemate. So you can see it there. That's the back of the Sun. I think this is going to be a common theme when I look at this. It's Azerbaijan. This is the back of the Daily Star. So Republic of Ireland won, Azerbaijan won, and $500,000 Mo. So Mo Salah wants a staggering £500,000 a week to extend his stay at Liverpool. We will bail on racists, Gareth in plea. Gareth Bale says Wales players are prepared to walk out if they suffer racist abuse. Obviously we saw that disgusting abuse levelled at England players in the game against Hungary the other night. Back of the Sunday Mirror, it's a crying Shane. This is on the Republic of Ireland's 1-1 draw with Azerbaijan. Shane Duffy saving our blushes. What else is on the back of that? More, that's pretty much the same story about Salah. $500,000 a week deal to stop Salah leaving to cop him. We deserve to win this 4-1, insists Stephen Kenny. That's the back of the Sunday Mirror Sport. Obviously his post-match comments. Sunday People as well. It's an English paper, but Bale will walk if we're abused. So pretty much the same stuff around the back pages, but it's all about one thing, and that's the Republic of Ireland. I thought this one was interesting. Rescue Act and Kenny, I'm not going anywhere, but the World Cup is gone. So Stephen Kenny acknowledging that the World Cup dream is in tatters. I think it pretty much was after the Luxembourg defeat earlier in the year. But Katie Taylor on top, Irish boxing champ, defends title with ease. This was against Jennifer Han last night. Katie Taylor retaining her lightweight belts, and this is Sunday Times, plenty to go through there and over the next hour and a half. The Daily Mail doesn't really mince its words. Not good enough. World Cup hopes wither as Ireland held by Azerbaijan, and Faro progress lost as wait for competitive win drags on. A disconsolate Stephen Kenny looking down on the Aviva Stadium turf. Philip Quinn writing there. And then relentless drive, a daunting task for me to prevent a mighty Dublin surge to another title, the ladies football final. We got Corus Staunton at Croke Park later on to go through that. The Observer, cricket on the back, but then Jonathan Wilson will get to this a bit later. The rise of the Petro clubs, PSG, City and Chelsea have eclipsed the crisis hit. Old guard talking about the lament of Barcelona in Spain, and also Real Madrid. We also have the Sunday World. Good is over. Ireland's World Cup dream dies in front of fans. Stephen Kenny's future as Ireland manager is under the microscope again, writes Roy Curtis after his latest Aviva humiliation. And then a lot of previews of the All-Ireland finals next weekend, Mayo and Tyrone. And Paul McGrath, the book stops with boss Stephen Kenny, and we'll get to that piece that he did in just a moment. And to finish the kind of back page visuals is the Sunday Independent with the best headline I've seen today. Frustration once again. Duffy to the rescue, but draw offers no comfort to Kenny's strugglers. And Dominant Taylor cruises to victory. So Katie Taylor flying the flag, and Leona Maguire's doing the same at the moment in Ohio with the Solheim Cup, with Europe 5.5 to 2.5 ahead, and open all 4 foursomes matches this morning over in the United States. And the business as usual post-pandemic. This is Eamon Sweeney writing that nothing's changed. The song remains the same despite all the pandemic that of the Premier League spending, which topped over $1 billion. So I think Tommy Martin, there's only one place to start. That is the national team, the boys in green, the biggest show in town, and a show that's not really entertaining us that much on a consistent basis anyway.
Yeah, I really wish I didn't have to talk about this, because it was a tough watch yesterday. Sort of in the cold light today, I'm trying to sort of find a bit of a balance on it, because after Wednesday I was very positive about things, and I think a bit like yourself, John. I thought, look, this is progress. We are seeing progress. That word now that is, well, I tell you, that word has become important because it's Roy Barrett, as chairman of the FAI board, Stephen Kenny's boss, he was asked, would Stephen Kenny get a new contract? He said, if he didn't qualify for the World Cup, and he said, if there is a continuing sense of progress, then yeah, absolutely. So that's what people are looking for. And on Wednesday night, you thought, yeah, absolutely. They well set up, offered a threat, played really good stuff, and agonising defeat and all that. But there was a sense of progress. But I was on air with Richard Dunn and David Delaney the following night, and I asked them that question: should he be offered a new contract now? Should the FAI back their man? And both of them said, hold on a minute, Saturday would tell a tale. This juncture now was the most important moment. Can they back it up on Saturday and not happen what happened against Luxembourg? And unfortunately, it happened not quite as badly as against Luxembourg, but it happened again. So in my own personal point of view, not that it matters in the big scheme of things, I can't go from flip in 24 hours from being supportive and thinking he's the right man for the job to saying Kenny out. But I think the tone across a lot of the newspaper coverage is, there is a bit of a culture war, in the sense there are those people entrenched that we must back Kenny whatever happens now, because it's all about this wonderful sunlit uplands in the future. And then there's the camp who have been ranged against them since the start.
Do you think that exists? Do you think that exists as a real thing, Tommy?
Yeah, I think it does. But I think, as with any sort of polarized political positions, there's a whole majority of people in the middle who are floating in that and are sort of generally have goodwill towards what's going on.
Can we sense if they're turning? Can we sense if they're turning, Tommy, or not? It's very hard it's hard when you're getting text messaging, and most of them are negative, and it's hard when you're looking at Twitter. And I think there are a lot of factors here that are bigger than Stephen Kenny. Look, I was just going through the goals that were scored, Tommy. 1 goal in 4 games against Wales and Denmark in the Nation League under the end of Martin O'Neill and Roy Keane reign in 2018. 7 goals in 8 games for mixed qualifiers for the Euros. That Gibraltar game, remember, in the wind, we got a lucky 1-0 win almost. It's very hard to put your finger on almost the mood music of the people in the middle.
Well, Neil Reardon in the Irish Sun had a good pre-match piece yesterday, which said that the tone of the Aviva crowd would finally give us a verdict as to whether the people were with Stephen Kenny and his project, because you couldn't really tell on the extremes of online opinion where people were. I think most people are reasonable, decent, and will use the evidence of their own eyes. And I have to say, I thought it was bad yesterday. I'll read a bit from Eamon Sweeney's piece, because I think he ticks a few of the things I wanted to that I think reflect a fair view of what people might think about it. I don't know if your text lines are given the same. So he says, Ireland must beat Serbia on Tuesday to prevent this qualifying campaign from degenerating into one of the greatest fiascos in our football history. So it's a strong start. So what the fear was yesterday, going into yesterday, get a good result and we go into Serbia with momentum, and whatever happens in the group, we're going places. Bad result, and we've got Serbia coming to town. And John, I saw Serbia yesterday. We were covering the other matches on Virgin Media last night, and we had dual screen job. But Serbia look good. They are in a really good place. They've got quality. They've got serious goal threat. And I'm really worried about Ireland. I think we might be better set up to play Serbia than we were against Azerbaijan. But just to read on, Eamon Sweeney says in the Sunday Indo, the huge hopes invested in Stephen Kenny's brave new world are dying on the vine and could perish altogether, barring a redemptive victory in 2 days. And this is what really got a lot of people about yesterday. There seemed to be something grimly symbolic in the double substitution which took place after the hour yesterday. The subbing of Troy Parrott and Jason Molumby and that of Aaron Connolly at half-time meant that 3 of Ireland's brightest young stars have been replaced by 3 much more seasoned campaigners. And the impression of a visionary being mugged by reality was enhanced when, seeking to save the game in the final 20 minutes, Ireland resorted to the traditional tactic of lashing hopeful crosses as the centre-backs joined the attack. That line there, the impression of a visionary being mugged by reality, that might be fair or unfair, but that is a perception that you can't help that can't help but come through from what happened yesterday. And what the balance of the 15 games is telling you is that you can talk about the future, and people use the line for international football as a results game, as a cliche, but what that means is it's not short-term sort of lack of imagination. You need results to give yourself time and momentum, to give your players belief in what you're doing, to give space for what you're trying to do to grow. And he hasn't been getting those results, and that's why we're sitting here, on a Sunday afternoon, back seemingly I don't know whether it's rock bottom. People have used that line in the papers today as well. But I think Tommy Conlon says Wednesday was one step forward, yesterday was 2 steps back.
It's never-ending purgatory, I think, is a drift. We're in,
Exactly.
we're in the middle of nowhere.
Well, the decline of the Catholic Church. Maybe it all makes sense. It's our way of purging ourselves.
Mark Gallagher in the Daily Mail's writing, the paragraph I took out of his piece was, as ambitious and laudable as Kenny's plan for Irish football is, there still needs to be an emphasis on the little things because they can trip you up, the little details, as Trapattoni would have said. Makhmudov came into this game as Azerbaijan's danger man. He was their most potent attacking threat, having scored their only 2 goals in this qualifying campaign, and yet no Irish player saw fit to close him down at the edge of the box. That was one of the more concerning elements of last night's performance at the Aviva. 8th in the world, Portugal, 112th in the world, Azerbaijan. Michael Verney, when you're looking at Sunday sports writing, what are you picking out from the bones of this, I suppose?
Yeah, just another line from Eamon Sweeney that kind of painted another fairly bleak picture. Azerbaijan came to Dublin off the back of a defeat by Luxembourg. They're second in the year. In the last 3 years, they've also lost to Montenegro, Moldova, Kazakhstan, Kosovo and Belarus. Their manager is on the verge of being sacked, and they are ranked 112th in the world between North Korea and Mozambique. Most of their team play in a domestic league rated 30th in Europe. There's an awful lot in that, and there's not much. By reading that, you wouldn't think there's much quality in that. And then just going to Paul McGrath's piece, I think he adds to a point that Eamon has kind of delved into there as well. He just said, can we attack a team that comes to our house to defend? So while we were set up, quite well defensively against Portugal, when the boot is on the other foot and when we have to attack and we have to do the pressing and we have to do the pushing, it was kind of some of the same old failings coming home to roost again. Obviously, we couldn't score again. And then just a couple of lines from Paul McGrath that were interesting as well. He just said, but in the second half, all we did was what we used to do under Giovanni Trapattoni, Martin O'Neill. We put balls in the box and hoped for someone to get a header on it. There was no passing the ball around here. And take it from me, that kind of knock-it-in football is easy to defend. You know what is coming and you know what the other team is trying to do. There's no surprise, no trick, no variety to the play. So I think that's probably another worrying aspect is we probably did try and play in the first half. We didn't get any rewards for it, but that we reverted to type, and by reverting to type, I mean just that long ball that we're traditionally associated with. And that's probably... I suppose it's probably only natural that you would be desperate in desperate times. And Paul McGrath just asked another couple of interesting questions. He just says, no other Irish manager would be indulged with such results. He said, who would want the job? Who would take the job? And then he just, at the end of his piece, he just said, we need a Jack Charlton type figure to save us. Is that what we need? And then he also brings up the fact that in essence, that we won't have a game of consequence until March of 2023 when the next qualifiers start, because essentially we're out of the running to qualify now. So that would be exactly 3 years, I think, since Stephen Kenny took over. You'd be hard pressed to think that the same man would be in charge at that stage if the results continue in the vein that they have been in.
The ex-pros have an inside, lads, that we don't as broadcasters and journalists. And Paul McGrath played at 2 World Cups. There's a frustration I feel from them that they know that it's about getting there, and maybe that's the most important thing rather than the style and the performances. And you can really feel that in a lot of their commentary, can't you, Tommy?
I think that's definitely the case. There's also a sense from the start that they weren't impressed with the mood music around when Stephen Kenny came in. You know, I'm generalising here across a few different generations. I mean, the Jack Charlton generation, and you know, maybe the more recent people like Richard Dunn, who played, you know, and some of the former managers as well. Now, probably maybe unfairly from Stephen's point of view, but the perception was that, and he, you know, so I think Stephen's line was that he wanted to change the perception of Irish football around the world. And what people took out of that, maybe unfairly, that Stephen wasn't this probably wasn't what Stephen intended to get across, but what people inferred from that was that everything that went before was crap, was long ball, was muck. You know, Andy Townsend rang up Paul Kimmage last year, absolutely irate about some of the stuff that was being said. He felt, I don't know whether this was people telling him stuff and he was getting the wrong end of the stick. He felt was being said about the Jack Charlton days and the football they played, and he wanted to do a piece and ended up being a really good interview with Kimmage last year in the Sunday Indo. I think a lot of those guys feel it's like you're in a job and a new manager comes in, you know, like The Office and the lads from Swindon, and a new manager comes in and says, right, you lot, you don't know what you're doing. I used to work at, you know, Acme Co across the road, and I'm going to change the way you're doing. And people sit back and they go, oh yeah, are you? And they fold their hands. I kind of feel like a lot of the old pros, the old ex-internationals have kind of have taken a sense that everything they did in their day wasn't, you know, modern progressive futuristic football. And there's been a little element of, there's been certainly a lack of patience from them towards what Stephen Kenny's trying to do. I'm like you guys, you know, my opinion is no better than the man in the street. So I also listened to the experts, and we had Brian Kerr and Damien again on our international coverage yesterday. So I was asking them what their sense of it was. First thing Damien said when he saw it, and I know you guys use Damien for your football coverage as well, and I think he's brilliant on tactical matters.
Yeah.
He looked at the team sheet and he said that formation, that 3-4-3, is really good when you're defending and you're playing against a stronger team, because it allows you to get 5 back, but you can also counter-attack really well because you get little pods of players together on the flanks, like we saw in Portugal. But it's not good when you're dominating the ball because you get outnumbered in midfield. And he said that before the game, and I think that transpired. I think we started with a lot of huff and puff in the game, but suddenly once Azerbaijan had survived the early onslaught, they played themselves into the game. They were able to bypass our midfield quite easily because they were overloading us with numbers-wise around the middle, because they had 3 men and the kind of striker was dropping back and helping. And Brian's point of view was, and look, Brian has been there and done that and been in Stephen's position before, that front 3 in which Stephen has invested an awful lot of patience, and oh my God, I really hope it pays off in time. And already Adam Ida has progressed so much in the year, but they are incredibly raw at this level, at any level. You know, Aaron Connolly is not in a great situation with his club and not getting many minutes, and you can see in his performances fluctuate because of that. Troy Parrott is finding his feet in League One, and Ida, as I say, is in the fringes at Norwich. And it's definitely progressed, but doesn't necessarily have a goal threat. And then you've got Malumbi, who's gone to Preston on loan and is not playing football in midfield as well. And he just feels there's a lot of youth in that team. And Brian's line is always, international football is hard. You come up against well organised teams of men who are not there to help you have a party in front of your home fans. And it's a tough place for some of these young lads to be at times. And
it is when they score. They can put all the players behind the ball.
There you go. Yeah, that's a very tough place to be.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, are there more factors at play than just Stephen Kenny or not Stephen Kenny? There are, I'm sure, plenty of candidates who can play attractive football and can get results. It's not about Kenny or not Kenny, but I just think there are many factors at play here. There is the fact that it emerged that the FAI was financially mismanaged in the past and is in a financial position that they would prefer not to be in and had to get a bailout from the taxpayer. There is the global nature now of the Premier League. It's harder for Irish players to break into that. There are issues like state support. And Michael, you're a horse racing man like myself. Horse racing in Ireland is under the Department of Agriculture. It's seen as an industry. Greyhound racing is seen as an industry. And they get huge amounts of public money every year. When soccer is the most participated sport in the country, more people play soccer than any other sport, but it gets a pittance. Now you have UEFA and you have FIFA can support associations, and if associations are well run, and you hope the FAI will be in the next few years, then it should be able to stand alone. But at the moment, we could do with more academy support, we could do with more structural support to build an industry when we have now young lads not able to go to the UK. And maybe they shouldn't anyway. Maybe they should be following the example of Jamie McGrath, who went to Maynooth University. Or maybe they should be following the example of Josh Cullen, who's playing in Belgium now on a regular basis. And you could see that players who play regularly for their clubs generally tend to perform better than players who are gassed, as we've seen in a couple of examples over the last few days. So I think our expectations as a sporting nation are very, very high. I think there's a lot of anger out there at the way football has been run in the country, and that's understandable. But the rugby team has never got to a World Cup semi-final in 35 years. And I wonder sometimes, do we have expectations that are grounded in our brilliant performances of getting to World Cups and Euros in the past, and that we can't let go of that? And there's a frustration then. We're just frustrated at the whole situation almost more than the manager. Michael, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I'd agree with you on that, John. Our expectations are definitely very high. And I think something, like we talked about, a lot of these players have struggling club careers. There's no point in saying any different. They're playing down the tiers and they're not playing that much. They're not getting enough time on the pitch, and it distinctly looked like that. Like, we were flagging big time in the second half yesterday. And when Duffy scored, you thought we'd push on, we'd show energy to try and get a win. And if anything, the boot was on the other foot, and it was Azerbaijan that were going for the win. And then just as regards our expectations, Paul McGrath also had in his column there, and kind of hadn't really thought about it like this, and maybe I'm not, au fait with soccer as much as I should be, but he just said, we've only qualified for 2 of the last 10 Euros or World Cups. And I think when you put it like that, and you think, God, yeah, the last one is obviously when we beat Italy in 2016, and then, before that, what are you looking at? You're looking at 2002 before that. And it's mad when you put it that way. And maybe it's almost like, expectations football-wise or GA-wise in a county like Kildare. The pressure is always massive on whoever's manager of Kildare, that they should be competing for All-Irelands or in around there. But traditionally, they haven't really been there. And while we have, as a country in soccer, we have got some great results. The Germany result and going back to 90 and 94, and the Italy result in 2016, they're almost like asterisks in time. And when you look at the bigger picture overall, we haven't been consistently at that level. And at the moment, we're definitely, we're even below. Even the sanest person would have, realistic expectations, but the way we're performing now are even well below what those realistic expectations would be for Irish soccer. And as I say, it's going to be really interesting to see how it plays out. As McGrath says, there definitely are meaningful games between now and March 2023, because I think those games will decide whether Stephen Kenny is still there or not. But it's so disappointing to be heading into the rest of a campaign and not really have anything to look forward to. The only things that are going to be decided over the next while, basically, are will Kenny hold on to his job or will he not?
John, just without getting into the bigger picture about whether our expectations as a nation are too high and across the board. I mean, with Irish football, our model has been completely disrupted and broken by, the traditional model where we sent our young kids over to England to learn the game, to become professional footballers, and they played in the higher reaches in England, and we took the best of them and the best of the diaspora as well, and made an international team out of them. That was already being thrown out the window by the growth of the Premier League academies and the global reach that they had. And now the Brexit aspect, where you can't sign under 18s in Britain anymore, has further thrown it away. So we're in a total time of disruption with our youth production and everything that's going on. Look, there's a huge amount of I know you've done panels and things about Irish youth development and the academies with the League of Ireland clubs and the schoolboy situation, and the controversies over that, and the rows about what's the right way of doing it. We have a lot of hope in terms of young players. The under-21s had a really good win away in Bosnia the other day. They were very, from what I saw of it, they looked very impressive. But Stephen Kenny's under-21s were very impressive as well. There's no guarantee that it's going to come through. These lads need to make their way in the professional game and get games under their belts, and that is a huge factor into why Stephen is struggling. Aside from the lads he did pick, our top scorer yesterday in the squad. Top scorer in the squad for this game was James McLean with 11 goals in 83 internationals. Next up, Shane Duffy, and he's on 5 now. 2 of the strikers have 2 each. Troy Park had 2 against Andorra. So, there's no. We had 21 shots on goal and 5 on target, I know the quality of those shots, those chances you can question. Gavin Cooney of the 42, I just saw tweeted there that, I don't know if people are into the expected goals thing, but if they are, I think he said our expected goals were around the 2 mark, and Azerbaijan's were 0.28. So I would take that any day. a 2-0 would have done yesterday, but it's just that the Kenny thing is you're right, John. There are a lot of different debates going on here. I mean, my point about what Brian Kerr and Damien Delaney were saying yesterday is, did he get the selection and the tactics wrong for a game? No matter what's going on behind the scenes with developing players and developing young players, a manager, one of his jobs is to get the tactics right and the selection right, and he does have to be judged on that on an ongoing basis as well. That's part of a manager's key performance indicators.
KPIs.
You know.
Okay, we got to take a break. Tommy Martin and Michael Verney. All I can say is this is the biggest show in town. Unquestionably, the Republic of Ireland soccer team is the biggest show in the country. I almost feel like, is Micheál Martin listening? Can we get some investment from somewhere? Can we get some help? Because I think we're all frustrated, and there's lots of reasons for that, and there's lots of factors, and I don't think there's an easy answer to get out of this, but hopefully we will, and we'll let it energised debate on 53106 in our text machine. Seriously, if our expectations don't include beating Luxembourg and Azerbaijan at home, we might as well give up, says Paul. Well, Paul, keep the faith in some way if you can. We might beat Serbia on Tuesday. We're going to be back with the Sunday papers after 2. The ladies football final today, the All-Ireland final next week. Plenty to look ahead with Tommy Martin and Michael Verney. And you're welcome back to Off the Ball here on News Talk. John Duggan sitting in for Joe Malloy until 7, as well as listening on News Talk. You can watch us on the digital and social channels for Periscope on Twitter, at Off the Ball, YouTube, Facebook, and on the OTB Sports app. We're joined on the Sunday paper review by the Virgin Media broadcaster Tommy Martin and the Irish independent sports writer Michael Verney. Just update you on some scores from around the block in terms of the Solheim Cup. Europe went into today 5.5 to 2.5 ahead against the United States and Ohio, and at the moment they are up in 2 matches in the foursomes. So Leona Maguire 2 points yesterday, and Mel Reid are 3 up at the moment on their opponents, and including Nelly Korda through 6 holes. Europe up in another match. 1 match is all square, and the United States up in 1 match. So up in 2, all square in 1, and down in 1. Looking very promising for Europe in the Solheim Cup. And Leona Maguire, what a performance, the Cavan native. Wicklow won the Junior Ladies Football Championship final 217 to 19 over Antrim. At the moment in the Intermediate Ladies Football final, it's Westmeath 1-5, Wexford 2 points at the first quarter break. Obviously our discussion so far has been dominated by the Republic of Ireland and their draw against Azerbaijan last night. I just really admire people who text in or send in a message or an email of significance, and this is one I want to read out. On 53106, Stephen Kenny's doing great, not just for the now but for the future. He's never used COVID, injuries or other things as an excuse. He's never said we don't have the players a la O'Neill, Keane, Trapattoni and numerous pundits. He believes in who he is, supports them and always G's them up. They could do with paying him back because Kenny didn't miss the target from 10 yards. Coleman did. Kenny didn't put a corner and free kick into the keeper's hands. McLean did. Kenny didn't pass the ball out of play. Malumbi and Horgan did. The players have let Kenny down in many instances, but he sticks by them and never brings up these failings that could cost him his job. If someone does come in down the line, they'll be grateful for all the work Kenny's done in blooding these players and instilling a new football culture in Irish players. Charlton gave us some glory days, but inherited Hewson, Brady, McGrath, Galvin, Stapleton, Lawrence and etc. from my own hand, and Liam Toohey. Charlton then dismantled all that work by capping the likes of Alan Curran and Tommy Coyne. I'm not too sure if that's fair. Brian Kerr handed O'Shea, Robbie Keane, Duff, Dunn, etc. from the underage ranks to Mick McCarthy for his glory days. People may not be grateful of Kenny now, but these players and his football will come good either for him or his successor. Another texter, with respect, the Irish national football team is only the biggest show in town for the middle-aged and above. It's a complete anomaly to find many under the age of 40 who would suggest the national team is anything other than a passing interest. Apart from the odd bandwagon jumping opportunity every couple of years, it doesn't really register. The FAI can't sell their tickets. The RFU can't sell enough. Again, I would respectfully suggest the biggest show in Ireland is beamed in from the Premier League, says Carl in Cork. It might sound crazy. Would it be worth putting Shane Duffy up front? He's our top scorer over the last few years, our biggest threat. Think he would have beaten Luxembourg, Slovakia, Azerbaijan had he been there for the 90. What do we have to lose? Tommy Martin.
You know what? Let's give it a go. No, yeah, we tried everything else. The first email on Stephen Kenny, I completely agree with him. Like, I think he's been look, you can question his judgment on games, whether we played great, we should have won 4-1. You can argue or disagree, whatever. But he's been full of class and done all the right, said and done all the right things. And his character is unimpeachable in terms of how he's looked after, how he talked about the players, and the intent behind his stewardship is all good. I hope that person is not right, that somebody else would get the benefit of all the good work that he's done in bringing these guys through. I mean, look, even the improvement in Adam Hida in 1 year is testament to what can be achieved by young players who in the progression that he can make. And I hope Kenny gets a chance to bear the fruits.
Okay, Tommy Conlon, I think there's a degree of resignation to his piece in the Sunday Independent. I'll just read a bit out. Ignore the fact Portugal had enjoyed 70% possession. This is the other night. That they had 29 shots on goal to 14 corners to Ireland's 3. That they launched some 50 crosses into the Irish box. But in the ongoing search for green shoots of recovery in Irish international soccer, most of those inconvenient statistics were brushed under the carpet. Indeed, the result itself was almost brushed under the carpet. We'll come back to this maybe before the end of the paper review, but I do want to move on, Michael Verney, to the ladies' football final today in Dublin and Meath at 4:15. History going to be made one way or the other?
Yeah, big time, John. And do you know what? The most startling thing of it all is it's great to see the level of coverage across the papers. Isindo alone has 6 pages on the 3 ladies finals today. I think there's 4 pages on the senior final and 1 on the junior and 1 on intermediate, which I just don't think we would have seen in recent years. So the whole 2020 campaign has definitely had a massive impact media-wise. I think everywhere has upped their game big time and realised that these games deserve an awful lot more coverage than they were getting. And it's not just coverage, it's some really, really good in-depth interviews, profiles and different things that are going on. The Meath story is definitely going to garner most of the attention today. It's been a remarkable turnaround. In 2015, Cork beat them by 40 points in a qualifier. A year later, Westmeath absolutely annihilated them at senior level as well. They put their hand up then to look to be regraded for the 2017 year. They went back to intermediate. They got to a semi-final that year, but crucially, they got Eamon Barry on board, or Eamon Murray, I should say. After being coaxed several times, he said no to the job many times, but because he prefers working with underage talent, and then seeing them flourish at senior level. But they eventually twisted his arm, and it's been a remarkable 4 years since. So any of the players I was talking to said that they needed to go back, they needed to build from the bottom. They've definitely built from the bottom. There was probably even some bad results even in 2017 and 2018. But they got back to a semi-final of the intermediate in 17, they got to the final in 18, final in 19, and eventually got over the line last year. And when you're coming up to senior level, like no more than a team coming up from Christy Ring to Joe McDonough, or Joe McDonough to Lee McCarthy level in hurling, it's very, very difficult to make a mark in that first year. But they've carried the swell of momentum from the final last December all the way into this year. They were also relegated to Division 3 of the league a couple of years ago. They won Division 3, they won Division 2 in April, and now they're in an All-Ireland final, having overturned that 40-point defeat to Cork in the semi-final in the most dramatic of circumstances. They were down 7 points with 5 minutes to go and ended up drawing and then ended up winning by 2 points in extra time. It would be an unbelievable fairy tale. And I think so many people have bought into this Meath team. What do people think of or what do people remember most, apart from the hard edge that Meath had in the 90s and the late 80s? It's the green key-pack jersey, and the ladies have key-pack on the front of it, and it's maybe the men's rivalry with Dublin and Meath hasn't gone Meath's way, the Royals' way in recent years, but it would be some turn of events if they were able to win the senior today. And they're getting most of the coverage today just because it's such a sensational story, really rising from the ashes.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the Mick Bowen piece as well in the Sunday Independent. I thought that was a lovely piece.
It's a brilliant interview. Yeah, it's he's such an interesting guy. I know he's done interviews with you guys as well that I've heard, and he's such a brilliant talker about coaching and improving players and managing teams and managing people and all that. He's like seriously impressive guy, like, you know, and but this piece again, like, it just, there was loads of stuff I didn't know about him. Like, there's a great sort of background about his father. His father's from his father's buried in West Clare near Lahinch, but he was born in Fecal, and he went into Maynooth to study for the priesthood, but he left and he was told not to come home. So off he went to London working for Bachelor's Beans. He ran an ice cream van around Dollymount, raised the money, put himself through college, and he ended up as vice principal of Art School Rish in Marino. And he was he sounded like an incredible character. And I think these people, I think when you get a little bit, we're going to come to James Horan in the Sunday Times in a minute. Like, when you get this bit of background to these characters who are on the national stage in these games, it really adds to your sort of enjoyment and sense of the tapestry of the occasion. And the rest of it then is just really interesting stuff about Bohan and how he used to go when he started coaching at a high level. Then he coached Clare's footballers for a year. That he felt it was sort of, his father had died at this stage, and he felt it was almost like a tribute, you know, to his father. So he would drive down, you know, in the lashing rain, winter nights, down to coach with Colin Collins, down with the Clare footballers. That sort of background is the sort of the character of the man. But there's a brilliant little coaching tidbit there that I thought, he's full of this stuff. If you've heard him interviewed on the radio or anywhere, he's got all these loads of these little things about coaching. You know, he says in his first year with the Dublin women's team in 2017, they brought in a biomechanist from DCU to observe the group. He says, I couldn't understand how, with the exception of 3, every single one were kicking off their laces as opposed to their instep. You look at every single inter-county male footballer, they put the ball over the bar with their instep, with a few exceptions. So what he's saying there is you're kicking off the smallest part of the foot where the bone is protruding, and it's less accurate. So he basically what he boiled it down to is that Bohan says that at an early stage in coaching, there was a tendency to accept lower standards in female players, that if they could kick it anyway, it would do. So, like, that is the microscopic detail that he brought in to his, those little coaching points. And then there's a stat then in 2016 in the All-Ireland final, they had a shot-to-score ratio of 32%. A year later, after working on that aspect, they had a shot-to-score ratio of 69%. So that's how you win All-Ireland. I'm
hearing a future Dublin men's senior manager. I'm hearing that if they do the 5 in a row today.
I wonder, though, because I wonder with these guys, I mean, that's like saying he hasn't given as much in the last
not at all. Not at all.
As Jim Gavin. I think with Jim Gavin, because he actually talks about Jim Gavin, and he says he came on the phone to him and he was eating chips down in Lahinch with Mick Bohan's brother, and he says he was joking, and Gavin saying, "Oh, you can't be having burgers and chips. You're still on the telly. I'm finished. I can eat whatever I want." And he's saying how Gavin sounded like a different fella, because when he was involved, Bohan worked with Gavin at one stage in Dublin. He was so rigid, and that's the way he formed himself over a period of time, and from his training, like, he was a different person now that he's out of it. And you kind of wondered, someone like Mick Bohan has probably done the exact same level of intensity with the Dublin women's team over the last half decade. And I'd say maybe once this cycle is done, you'd wonder whether you'd want to go and do that again and not take a little bit of time out.
Yeah, Cora Staunton will be with us for the Dublin Meath game, and she'll be joining us from Croke Park about 3:30. One of the things I took out of it, and it's not really even sporting related, was the trips he was making to Clare to work with the Clare footballers, and a dry day like today, you're relaxed, but with the wind and the rain howling, it's a 400-kilometre round trip. I ended up, honestly, with pains in my neck from these trips, and I remember wondering, how do people do this? And I'm just thinking of people out in the country at the moment who have long commutes to work, and I really hope that, I know the government want blended working as the pandemic gets into a new phase, but I really hope the option is there from employers for some remote working, because when you can't get outside 2 kilometres of your home, when you can't see your loved ones, when you can't give them a hug for months, when people have passed away, I hope there are learnings, I hope there are lessons from this pandemic about the way we live our lives, and we just don't go back to 2 years ago when we look at that. And I think the commutes are important, and being able to be with more time with your families, I think, is important.
Incidentally, John, there would be many people in Mayo that would be of the opinion that the pandemic has helped them massively, with a lot of guys being able to relocate to Mayo and not being finishing work in the city at 5 o'clock and trying to get back for training and things like that. So there would be a lot of people, and I know it has been discussed even in the Mayo camp, about the benefits that COVID has given to them. So I would definitely echo what you say there. Hopefully we won't return to the rat race that we were in for so long.
I walked out of the office yesterday and it was great to see hospitality open outdoors and a thriving city again. But I'm just wondering, are there learnings? Have people taken a breath around this? It just seems like very quickly that it's getting back to normal. And in ways that's good, and in other ways I think we need to ask questions about that as a society. Speaking of Mayo, Michael, I laughed out loud at the Joe Brolly piece in the Sunday Independent today when he was talking about culture and not really about Mayo, but more about his own story. I thought was quite funny.
Yeah, well, it was about his own story, but he was definitely having a go at Mayo, which would be seems to be in Joe's DNA at this stage. But I just started off at the start of the piece because I think it's important to read that before we go into his own little stories. He just said the day after Tyrone had overpowered Kerry physically and mentally in Croke Park, the Mayo captain, which he doesn't mention by name, but it's obviously Aidan O'Shea, Mayo captain, featured in a spread in the Sunday World magazine. He was pictured running out of the sea onto a sandy beach wearing only beach shorts, curiously holding a mobile phone in his right hand. He talked about his Kerry girlfriend having to wear red and green in the final, not green and gold, and not too subtly promoted a smartphone company. He said it could have been something straight out of the pages of Love Island. We will be waiting a while for the Tyrone captain, Pádraig Hampsey, to invite the readers of Hello into his Coal Island home, modelling Egyptian cotton pyjamas and showing his heart-shaped swimming pool. I do enjoy Joe's columns. I think some of the attacking of players' characters is unnecessary and totally unnecessary.
Is he not being a bit tongue-in-cheek though here?
It has been a bit tongue-in-cheek, but when you're doing it week in, week out, where possible, and I remember a column about Rob Henley, in the weeks after the All-Ireland final, where he ended up giving away a penalty and was black-carded, that just to me attacked his character, and I didn't particularly like it. But he obviously starts off that with Mayo, and then he starts going into his own career. And in fairness, when Joe starts telling stories of things that happened in his own career, it's always hugely entertaining. So he talks about basically in 1997 when he was playing club football, that he basically kind of lost the run of himself a bit. And he talks about how they'd been beaten, I think, in 2 county finals. And he said, in the first round of the Derry Championship in 1997, I played around the edges of the game. We drew at Glenullen and were lucky to survive. Before the replay, as we were waiting to go onto the field, Jeffrey McNichol, a Dungiven supporter, Joe obviously plays for Dungiven, came into the changing room. Jeffrey is a big brute of a man who isn't afraid of anybody. Boys, he said, there's something that has to be said, and I'm just going to say it. Rolly, you are making a show of yourself. You're making a show of the team and of the town. You think you're better than the rest of us. Stop being an a-hole. That's all I have to say, boys. Good luck today. And with that, he departed, and Joe said you could hear a pin drop, and he said they went out and absolutely destroyed their opposition, and I think they ended up winning the county championship that year. And the kernel of the story is about not having egos within a squad and having everybody pulling into one direction. But like it does have to be said, like he's basically comparing Tyrone and Mayo and essentially saying that it's his opinion that Mayo have certain egos within their squad and that they're not pulling into one direction, and that Tyrone are pulling into one direction, which I think is like, I think it's unnecessarily harsh to say that, ego has been what, prevented Mayo from getting over the line in the last 10 years. The best team that has ever played Gaelic football is essentially what stopped Mayo getting over the line in the last 10 years. Joe also starts talking just about how the Dubs had a ruthless high-performance culture, and he said this appears to be loosening. He said Desi Farrell dropping James McCarthy as captain for his club mate Johnny Cooper, whose best days are behind him. Joe's words, not mine. Looks like a political decision, not a performance one. The message to the group could easily be interpreted as, I wanted my own club man to lift Sam Maguire. Firstly, my own club man. Secondly, we are going to win Sam. I'm doing this for nostalgic reasons, for a guy I like. Fairly hard-hitting opinions there, to say the least. But he, at the end of it, the caveat of the piece at the end, and again, it says, everyone loves Mayo and its people. What's not to love? But winning at this level is an entirely unsentimental business. Tyrone or Millwall, no one likes them and they don't care. Liberated from the Hart era, they are an implacable and unpredictable opponent that will go to the bitter end. And he says, I fear for Mayo, and he's basically predicting a Tyrone win for some of the reasons that he has suggested within the piece. In fairness, it has given people plenty to talk about in the 6 days before the All-Ireland final. I will give that to Joe.
Mayo are in the final. Mayo are in the final. So whatever we talk about culture, they're in the final. They're 70 minutes away from winning All-Ireland for the first time in 70 years. They're the facts.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
So all of the other stuff is entertaining, brilliant commentary at times, but a lot of it is just noise until we see what actually happens on the pitch.
I think the great thing about the All-Ireland reading in the papers is, I think Mark O'Shea in the Mail hits the nail on the head, and it's a very simple point. He's given his take on the final, what's to come, and he talked about who the Mayo were maybe expecting Kerry, and they got Tyrone, and how that will affect the psychology of the whole thing. He says, he's not so sure anymore now about what's going to happen. In truth, and I think this is at the core of why Saturday's final is so engaging for so many of us, I'm really struggling to imagine how this game will play out. And that sense of uncertainty, of genuine intrigue, is surely the best gift our game has been given in an age. That is the most important point to make about this season's All-Ireland Football Championship. I live in North Dublin. I'm a member in St. Vincent's GA Club. I live in the belly of the beast. But my God, thank God the Dubs are beaten this year. And I say that as someone who's a massive admirer of everything they did over their team over the last few years. But the senior intercounty GA men's championship badly needed what we're going to get next week. Whether this is a great Mayo team or a great Tyrone team or an average Mayo team or an average Mayo team, we have a genuine, all the previews come at it from a different angle. There's some people say Mayo have it. I think Michael Foley has a preview where he says Mayo will finally come through. Brodie says Tyrone. Mark O'Shea says Tyrone. Somebody else says Mayo. What's going to happen? Who's going to mark who? It is all out there now, and it is invigorating, and it has just I cannot wait for next Saturday, and I think it's just brilliant to have that again. That sense of sport is the essence of sport is uncertainty and competitiveness and intrigue, and we've got it now for next Saturday.
It's that unpredictability. We don't know what's going to happen, and you couldn't have predicted the final pairing. With anyone with the best will in the world couldn't have predicted the final pairing going into the semi-finals. And I don't think that's what's so great about Saturday's final. No one could confidently predict what's going to happen. You just couldn't. And you wouldn't have predicted that Mayo would even get to an All-Ireland final without Cillian O'Connor as well. So nothing is impossible going into Saturday, and that's what makes it so intriguing. And I totally echo what Tommy says. We needed that. We needed something different. Sport is about things happening that maybe you don't foresee or you just can't believe will happen. And they probably both happened in the two semi-finals, and you'd be a brave person to call how next Saturday is going to go on. And that's brilliant. That will just have people glued to their televisions, and it will have people taking people's hands off to be one of those 41,500 people that are in Croke Park on Saturday.
Yeah, we wouldn't have predicted as well that Meath would have won the minor All-Ireland this year, that Offaly would have won the under-20 All-Ireland. You have Tomás O'Shea in your backroom team there, the footballers now under John Mahon. We had John Mahon on the show, extolling his virtues yesterday on the panel. Michael, has the appointment been warmly received by the faithful folk?
Yeah, unbelievably warmly received, John, to be honest with you. Nobody would have really seen that coming either. And I remember, funnily enough, I remember being in the press box for the under-20 All-Ireland. I was working that day, and Tomás was sitting up the back, and it kind of struck me at the time, but I didn't really take much notice of it. Then, when the news came out, I was like, "Oh, that's interesting. That makes a bit of sense now." From our point of view, there's so much buzz going around Offaly, particularly over the last 3 or 4 months with the under-20s. The hurlers getting promoted to Division 1, the hurlers winning the Christie Ring, the footballers getting promoted to Division 2. And this is just yet another, yet another feather in our cap. Since Shane Lowry came on board financially in April, so many things have happened. There's so much goodwill around the county. There's no point in saying any different. We couldn't have even contemplated getting someone like Tomás O'Shea up until now. We just wouldn't have had the structures in place. We wouldn't have had, I think, to be honest, we wouldn't have had the people in place to lure someone of his calibre. He's essentially going to leave his job as an Irish Independent columnist and his job as a Sunday game analyst, one of the best in the business, to go and work with our county and make probably 3 drives a week up from his Cork base up to the Faithful Fields in Kilcormack. And there's players absolutely buzzing. You would have heard John saying his phone was hopping with different players. There was players probably maybe thinking about stepping aside. that I'd imagine would definitely not be thinking about stepping aside now. There's guys who would have seen Tomas in the Sunday game, younger guys in particular, and would be just hanging on his every word. So I think he has so much to offer us, and it's a sign of where we've come as a county, really since Michael Duggan took over as chairman. So many good things are happening, and it's interesting, like, some commentators were giving out that Michael was on duty for RTE some days, maybe the Offaly were playing. And it's funny now that one of the days he was on duty for RTE, he was still in Offaly mode, and he was down luring Tomas to Offaly. And it's just an unbelievable buzz around the place. And things are happening now that we couldn't have foreseen, or we wouldn't have thought possible, and that's what it's all about. The wheel can turn very, very easily when the right people are steering the wheel, and we definitely have the right people steering it at the moment.
Okay, well, the best of luck to Offaly. Just to let you know, in the Solheim Cup, 5.5 to 2.5, Europe led overnight against the United States. At the moment in the morning foursomes in Ohio, they're up in 2 matches. They're down in 1 and level in 1. But Leona Maguire again up in our match. Won 2 points yesterday, and Mel Reid and Leona Maguire 3 up on their opponents at the moment in the Solheim Cup. Just an amazing performance. Leona Maguire is going to win a major golf tournament, I feel, not too distant future. The way she's played as a rookie this year, I just think she's got it. She has it. Had it as an amateur. She's going to have it as a pro as well. And Dermot Calise will join us about 6:30 to go through her progression and the Ryder Cup as well, coming up in the next few weeks. Just back to the Mayo Tyrone game, Tommy. James Horan, there's a great piece from Michael Foley in the Sunday Times. I love the line because James Horan works for Coca-Cola, and obviously there's a degree of process if you're working for one of the biggest companies in the world. He Coca-Cola-ized Mayo, says one backroom team member. Or former backroom team member.
It's such a, like when we were having the discussion about Joe Brawley's piece, and Joe's, had to be in his bonnet about a so-called celebrity culture within Mayo. I think it's mostly directed towards what he perceives about Aidan O'Shea rather than Mayo as a whole. You read this and you kind of think, well, certainly James Horan is not any guy to entertain any sort of individualism, because it's there's a whole lot of great stuff about how he has he really wants to make Mayo into a systematic winning machine. And before we get to that, though, I always think, like, if you tell me something I haven't known about this guy, brilliant. I'm already glad I've read the piece. And this piece is worth buying the Sunday Times for alone, because maybe people knew all this stuff, but I didn't realise how James Horan apparently was like not cut out, or not seen as being cut out for football management at all. The piece says no one had ever seen him as a coach during his playing days. The club had been thrilled for years by his brilliance as a footballer, in parallel with his reputation as a player who despised the drudgery of training. One so laid back, he dozed off in a Mayo dressing room one day before a game against Roscommon. And it's a quote there from an old Mayo player, unnamed. It said, if you'd ever pick out one player from our batch as the last one to ever manage Mayo, he'd have been that player. But then he goes on to explain, I didn't realise that his dad had moved to New Zealand, and I think his mother presumably must be from New Zealand, and he's got connections over there. It says Horan has spoken about his affection for the culture of brilliant basics and ceaseless self-improvement that underwrites the all-black tradition. He said the parallels between New Zealand and Mayo were evident, a place with a modest population obsessed by a single sport, constantly craving success. But New Zealand was different in ways Horan wished for Mayo too. He'd have found the whole West of Ireland thing very frustrating, says Tom Prendergast, who grew up with him and joined him as a Mayo selector until 2014. The Mayo lads not wanting to prepare too well, not wanting to put themselves out there. He was just pissed off with this Mayo-ness, this excess of humility. So he said, we'll prepare properly and figure out step by step what needs to be done. We'll get the data, we'll take control of our destiny. And I think that the theme of the piece is that Horan is at odds with the noise around Mayo, the hullabaloo, the kind of daftness and the madness around them. He is at odds with that. He is this guy who wants to make it, you talked about the Coca-Colaization process, and look at every little logistical detail and make sure it's right, and eventually you'll get to the top of the mountain. And I guess the conclusion is, are they going to get to the top of that mountain, that process that he's been, he did it for 3 years and then he stepped away and he stepped back, basically a decade working on.
I think they're going to get there. I do think they're going to get there. I don't know.
John, keep your mouth shut for 6 days, will you? People are on high in Mayo already. People
don't listen to what I say. I said yesterday that Stephen Kenny should get a new contract before the games, so people don't listen to what I say. So don't worry about that. Don't worry about that, Mayo people.
Though, like you're looking at, Tyrone only have 3 in their history, and Mayo haven't won in 7 years.
I'm a relentless optimist and a relentlessly positive person. So Mayo, you are going to do it next Saturday. We're going to take a break here on the Sunday Paper Review. Michael Verney from the Irish Independent and the Virgin Media broadcaster Tommy Martin back in a few moments' time. And you're welcome back to Off the Ball on News Talk. John Duggan sitting in for Joe Malloy until 7 today with the Sunday Papers. Tommy Martin from Virgin Media and the Irish Independent's Michael Verney. Picking out the best stories of your Sunday in September. You can listen to us on News Talk and also watch us on the digital and social channels for Off the Ball, for Periscope on Twitter at Off the Ball, YouTube, Facebook and on the OTB Sports app. Rugby-wise, Willie Anderson's got a book out with Brendan Fanning, and there's a bit of a serialisation of that in the Sunday Independent today. Talking about the haka in 1989. Tommy, it was good fun, I thought.
Yeah, it's very enjoyable. It's every time you read any stories or books or stuff about the olden days in rugby, like it feels like you might be reading something from Victorian times compared to what it's like today and what we know it's like from the professional era. That he's talking about Jimmy Davidson, who was the manager at the time. And what did he get? They were only allowed 48 hours to gather before a game against the All Blacks, because anything more would have been the evil of creeping professionalism. It was insane, is the line that's used in the book. And the story of the haka thing, it's worth grabbing and reading how it's very funny. I mean, at the end of the day, they lose the game. What did it say? We lost the game, but we won the dance. It's tremendous fun.
Yeah, talking about just smoking a few beers at Grand Fox in the changing room afterwards. They had absolutely no problem with us. I'd say a few of them are glad to tell the story from the winner's perspective. Goes on in the Sunday, and though Drico had a bit of a wild side, so it's worth checking out, folks. Those rugby stories, Nick Popplewell and Mick Galway, have been great fun when they've been on with us in the last few weeks, and talking about the Lions and the Illicadoos and all those kind of stories. And it is a completely different world. And when we look at racing, Michael, there's a couple of things. There's a Champions Weekend next weekend. So Colin Keane has done a couple of interviews. He's the top flat jockey in the country, going to go for over 130 winners, I'd say, by the end of the season. He's already got over 100. And then we have Gordon Elliott back in the limelight. He served his time, as it were, in inverted commas, and I think that's fair enough, and I think we all need to move on from that. Yeah,
it's obviously going to be a big week. Champions Weekend is next Saturday and Sunday. Probably one of the races potentially of the year, and potentially even bigger than that. It's looking like Tarnawa and St Mark's Basilica are going to clash in the Irish Champion Stakes, which I think was initially billed for sometime after 4 o'clock, but they've moved it forward a couple of hours with the All-Ireland football final. There's a really interesting interview with Dermot Weld by David Jennings in the Racing Post, and Colin Keane stuff is in a couple of different places in the Times, and it's in the Independent. Colin Keane's a really interesting one from a point of view, like he's going for his 3rd Irish Jockeys Championship. I think he made the Century of Winners, I think it was last Saturday, and I'd safely say that he flies that much under the radar that only real ardent racing folk would actually know what he looks like. But what he is one of the best in the world, been compared to Frankie Dettori in many circles. He's just so good at what he does. Would ride predominantly for Ger Lyons. An interesting dynamic with him and Ger Lyons. He's gone out with Ger's daughter, and Ger would be notoriously hard-nosed, brilliant trainer, but he'd tell it like it is. But I asked him during the week whether he'd ever fallen out with Ger or anything like that, but I don't think he would dare go on on Ger's bad side. He's probably got too much riding on it. But this year, he's riding an awful lot more for Dermot Weld, and it was interesting to hear him talking. And Don McLean and Darrell Coore have both talked about here. Ger will you would not see this with many trainers, but Ger Lyons will basically give him the freedom to go and ride for another trainer in a race if he feels that he doesn't have that good of a chance of winning in that race himself, which is unheard of, really. And he's had over 130 rides, I think, for Dermot Weld already this year. And the reason he started riding for Weld predominantly was that he was over in Keeneland. I think it was Keeneland last year to ride Siskin for Ger Lyons in the Breeders' Cup, and Christoph Sumion was ruled out of the ride on Tarnawa, and he was basically sitting getting his lunch, and he got the call ended up being, the biggest win of his career. Now he's riding an awful lot for Dermot Weld. He's riding obviously a lot for Ger Lyons, and he's riding a lot for an awful lot of other trainers. But just a supreme talent. Looks like he's going to break Joseph O'Brien's tally of 126 winners in a season. That's the highest that's ever been achieved by an Irish flat jockey. Obviously, Champions Weekend is going to be discussed in detail over the week, but I think Gordon Elliott's return after his 6-month suspension this Thursday is definitely going to be a big part of the conversation this week. And I don't think it'll overlook Champions Weekend, but it will definitely be a big part of the conversation. And there's a small bit of an interview with him in the Racing Post today, or a snippet of a larger interview that's going to appear tomorrow. And just the main lines out were that he says he still lies in bed every night thinking about Envoy-Allen. Envoy-Allen, of course, was his stable star, which left his Culentry yard in the wake of the scandal in March, and he subsequently got a 6-month suspension. He's been very, very under the radar. He promised that he wouldn't appear in an Irish racecourse during that time. He hasn't. I would echo what you said, John, as well. He's served his suspension. He served his time. It's time for us all to move on, but it's going to be really, really interesting just to read this piece. The main quote that they have just teeing up the interview tomorrow is, "I just hope people can forgive me." And I'm sure he went through a lot of really, really tough times and tough moments when, horses that were in his care were winning, and, the various abuse and that would have been sent his way as well. But I think, as you said, I think it's time to move on now, and I'm sure he'll get back to doing what he does best, and that's training winners from Thursday onwards.
Yeah, and I hope when he does train winners that he speaks about it and talks about the horses and the winners that he has, if he's at Cheltenham and all that, and that there's not a wariness of that. I think people are forgiving folk, and we move on, we draw a line under it. And look, it was such a situation for the horse racing authorities to deal with, and they dealt with it.
Yeah, and as you said, John, I hope he just talks about, in the wake of these winners, just his passion for the game, because I've been up in his yard numerous times. And to see how it has developed and, how it's multiplied in size, the thing underpinning that is his passion for the game and his vision for the game as well. He's second only to Willie Mullins, who is, going to be regarded as the greatest jumps trainer of all time. So, yeah, I hope he opens up. And I think if he opens up, I think people will be a lot more open to him. But I expect business as usual to resume for him when he gets back in. And he's coming back at the perfect time. The jump season will be kicking off, probably in the next 6 to 8 weeks. So we're going to be seeing plenty of them from now on.
Little interesting nugget in the Colin Keane piece in the Sunday Independent with Darragh O'Hara. I look after myself to some degree, try to eat right. At the start of the year, we do plenty of exercise to get the body in shape or to where it needs to be. When we're busy during the year, we don't need to do as much because we're race riding the whole time we're riding out. After that, I keep busy at home. If I'm not at home in my own place, I'm out helping my father in his place in the evenings. Just keep moving, keep busy, keep the head sane more than anything. Just always a little bit of word of wisdom. Keep moving, folks. Just it can be difficult with routines and very busy days, but trying to just keep moving and keep active. It's good advice from Colin Keane. Sometimes it's very, very simple stuff that we sometimes can forget. The Sunday Times has a good bit of football, Tommy. It has stuff about Ronaldo and a Man United player that maybe the diehard Red Devils would remember, John O'Kane, who I suppose not for every Gary Neville and for every Roy Keane and for every Eric Cantona and Ruud van Nistelrooy, there's a player who didn't especially make it, as it were.
Yeah, it's extraordinary. The class of '92 sort of keeps throwing up stories of not just those who made it and made fame and riches beyond their wildest dreams and success, but those who didn't make it out of that generation and that team. And one I totally airbrushed this guy from my memory, but he did play. He did come on as a sub in the famous Alan Hansen "You'll Win Nothing with Kids" game in '95 when Ferguson gave Beckham and Gary Neville and a few of the other younger players their first real sort of taste of it, and he came on as a sub in that game as well. This guy John O'Kane was a right back in that team, and Gary Neville actually played as a centre half, and he basically suffers from autism, but it wasn't realised at the time. He didn't actually get diagnosed until his mid-40s. And this is a piece that is sad and very very revealing of how hard it must have been to be different in a football dressing room in that time, and in anywhere really in that time, when, as he says in the piece, anything around mental health or there wasn't the same understanding. If you were different, it was a problem. It starts by, he was born in Nottingham in 1974 with two strong traits, a rare gift for playing football and an internal wiring, which meant that having an actual football career, surviving the hard knock conformist professional game ultimately proved impossible. Sorry, this is an interview with Jonathan Norcroft, by the way. I think he has a book out about it, but this is a quote then. He says, "People knew I wasn't all there," in inverted commas, that I thought differently and acted differently. But in those days, it was all about getting on with it. The technical side was never an issue. It was the other side of football that killed me. Coaches and players thought, he's a laid-back kid, technically good, but a bit of a spaceman up there. That's what they used to call me, spaceman. Ferguson actually was quite understanding with him. He says he used to go to Fergie's office 3 or 4 times a day, or a week rather. I think he said Ferguson, knew that he was vulnerable in some way, that he needed a father figure to chat to. And he said, "Look, John, if you sort this out, you're playing for me. You're better than Gary Neville. What's holding you back? You should be my right back. There's something in your head you've got to work out." But I didn't know how to work it out. I had a disability, which I didn't disclose, and that's down to me. So he tells a story then about, it went wrong really after the Villa game. He played in a UEFA Cup tie against Rotor Volgograd in September 1995. And he saw his name listed at right back, and he couldn't handle it because he'd been playing left back for the reserves. So he asked Ferguson to switch him to left back, and Ferguson did, and he got skinned by the Russian winger that game, and he was taken off after half an hour, and his United career never recovered. So he bounced down through the leagues, and there's an awful. He says Eric Harrison decided he was lazy. He was the youth coach at the time. He ended up at Everton, and he said Howard Kendall, then the Everton manager, made him feel free, and he found the best form of his career in helping them avoid relegation in 1997-98. Walter Smith then replaced Kendall, and the first thing Walter Smith told O'Kane was, "I've heard you're a lazy bastard." O'Kane says his shutters went up. All the negative thoughts came. He ended up training with the under-18s. I went to Smith's office. I said, "What can I do to get in the team? I want to play." He said, "Get the FUCK out." And that choked me. It's just crushing to think of a guy who, maybe just the lack of understanding he had himself, and the lack of understanding anyone else had for those around him. Even as recently as 2019 on Twitter, he had a spat with Neville, because I think he was quite an anti-Glazer person, and Neville, he was criticising Neville for not being strongly enough anti-Glazer, and Neville said he cowered when he was in a United shirt, and it was it wasn't a very pleasant thing to happen. But the piece ends really nicely. It says he also remembers Eric Cantona out of the blue once saying to him in the dressing room, "Don't be like everyone else." Cantona never spoke much, and when he did, it was like God talking. It was a weird comment, John says, smiling. Maybe he saw something. Maybe he was telling me it's okay to be different.
Yeah, we just got to apologise for the B word there, Tommy. I like Walter Smith might have a different recollection of the conversation, but if that was the case, that's grim reading, I have to say, and representative of culture that I would hope has changed for the better, and I would expect, and I would think that it has.
Yeah, look, I absolutely. What comes through there is the guy himself was ignorant of his own condition. Everybody in football was ignorant. It was just you were supposed to get on with it, and if you were wired differently, as he puts it, it was just a really impossible world. But it's interesting that people, Ferguson and Cantona, were two people who had the emotional intelligence to know and understand that there was something there, and then they come out of it probably the best of anybody.
Michael, you've got a story to talk to us about cliff diving. I've decided not to read this because I want to see what you have to say about it. I think it's in the Mail.
Yeah, it's an really interesting interview with Mark Gallagher with a fellow by the name of Gary Hunt. He's from England, but the World cliff diving series is taking part in Dunpatrick Head in Mayo next week. It's actually, I think it's on next Sunday, so Mayo will either be in mourning or everyone will be delighted around the time that this is going on. But it's just the picture was really what caught my eye. It's Gary Hunt standing on a a springboard with, you know, a couple of thousand people to his right, a couple of thousand people to his left, wearing a pair of Speedos, multicoloured Speedos, with the words "Budgie Smuggler" written on the back of them. It just looks so. It's such a scary looking but brilliant looking photo, and you just see everything that's ahead of him. And he's a really, really interesting character. He's an eight-time cliff diving world champion. And I think one of the most interesting parts of it is that he's actually got a fear of heights. And he talks about it here. He's from Hampshire in England. He's actually relocated to France now. So he's actually hoping to dive in the Olympics in 3 years' time for France. And he would have went up against Tom Daly when he was younger. Tom Daly was a young up and coming diver in England, but he went from diving, I suppose the normal diving that we'd associate to cliff diving, which is a little bit different. But just talking about his fear of heights outside of diving, he just says, Mark goes in here, he just says, so while there's an undoubted daredevil element to the sport, Hunt is more of a technician, although ironically his mastery of cliff diving has led him to develop a fear of heights. It feels strange to say, but when I am on a platform and there's water underneath, I feel safe. But I don't like going out on a balcony that is 27 or 30 metres up, because I can feel that there is something pulling me to jump. The French call it l'appel du vide, the call of the void. I can't help but imagine what it feels like to jump, and that scares me, that I am being drawn to jump. So you'll never find me looking over the edge of a cliff or anything like that. And I kind of thought that was interesting, because it's almost like that's, you know, he's able to do this as a, you know, a performer, and he's able to do it brilliantly. But in normal day life, he would never dream of being in heights. And it's almost like, you know, some players who are unbelievably expressive on a pitch and, you know, dominate a game and be so vocal, and then off the pitch, they could be completely different people, or they mightn't be those sort of people that gel in crowds or anything like that. And I just thought this was a really interesting piece. When I saw it straight away, do you remember Captain Lance Murdoch in The Simpsons? You know, the Daredevil. That was immediately what
no,
I
I don't.
thought of.
It's nothing to do with the window, is it? No.
No. He used to do all these mad stunts on motorbikes, but he used to he'd be in hospital all the time with broken arms.
Like an Evel Knievel kind of type.
Yeah, kind of, yeah. And his body would basically be covered in cast. There was no time, I'd say, in The Simpsons where he was never covered in cast. But this is just a really interesting piece. And if people in Mayo next Sunday are looking to do something a little different after either winning an All-Ireland or losing an All-Ireland, maybe this would be a good way to kill a couple hours. It just
you're not telling them to throw themselves from a great height.
Well,
I'm not. I'm not telling them to do that, Tommy.
Cliff dive responsibly, with all the disclaimers. Actually, I'm very interested in this. We don't have time to get into it, but just for people out there, it's the front page of the Business Post. Not the Business Post, the Sunday Independent Business and the Sunday Times Business. Flutter imposing a €500 cap on monthly losses for gamblers under 25. So a €500 per month net deposit limit will be introduced for all punters under the age of 25. Flutter plans to launch this by the end of this year or early 2022. This is the owner of Paddy Power. I think belatedly the gambling industry acting, because they know that they've been a little bit out of sync with what's been going on. Tommy Morrison, have you ever done skydiving or parachute jumps or anything like that?
No, I'm quite happy on terra firma. I'm too old for that crack now.
Michael, you spoke with such passion and enthusiasm about Gary Hunt. So have you done any of this stuff?
Yeah, no, I have. I did a skydive in Las Vegas actually, and I did a bungee jump in Queensland. It was unbelievable. It was about 100 feet high, I think. And it was $200 to do the first jump. But once you were up there, if you wanted to do another one, you could do it for $50. So I decided I'd get my value. So I was the first one to do it of my group, and then I did it at the end again. It's a crazy buzz, yeah. If you do this almost like a swan dive off a little platform, it's unbelievable. There's actually another one in New Zealand where this is really, really scary, where there's water underneath you and they just let your head touch the water. That's how far they let you come down, and then you come back up out of the water. So you look like you're going to hit water. I actually wouldn't have been mad into heights, then kind of overcame it when I was about 11 or 12. I remember going up really high in a school tour, and I've loved them ever since. So I like all that kind of thing.
I can't even handle roller coasters.
Michael Verney, Daredevil. So were you not nervous?
Oh yeah, of course, yeah. But if you're able to overcome that initial nerve, you just get the buzz, which is just incredible. Like it's the sort of thing, like, you'll only be able to do it for a certain length of time. You mightn't be, in your 40s or 50s, you mightn't be physically able to do it. So I just said, try and do all those things as much as I can, and you'll be able to, when you're on your deathbed, you'll remember doing all these mad things that you did. So
what's the bigger buzz, the bungee jump or the skydive?
Oh, the bungee jump was crazy, because you're by yourself, and it's like 100 feet, and you just feel like you don't have it. You're careering to the ground almost, and then obviously your harness kicks in. That's phenomenal, crazy buzz.
Tommy, just before we go, I think just to maybe point listeners to a couple of articles. I think there's some good soccer stuff ahead of the return of the Premier League next weekend. We got Ronaldo and back to United and all that kind of thing, and then Jonathan Wilson as always.
Jonathan Wilson is a good piece about the petrol money, the impact of all that at the transfer window, what it says about where football is going and who's going to have the power now. Basically, the clubs that are independently financed versus the old super clubs. David Walsh is a good piece on the Ronaldo thing, which is thought provoking. Can I just mention in the news section of the Sunday Times, in their coverage of Afghanistan, headlines, a small piece at the bottom: Italy welcomes Afghan sportswomen in race of their life to flee the Taliban. Nothing we've talked about today can even compare with the reality of the female sports people trying to get out of Afghanistan in the last few weeks. And there's a story here about a football team in Herat in Afghanistan who had to crawl through sewage to get to Kabul airport and get themselves out of Afghanistan. It's extraordinary stuff, that their lives were basically at risk for the crime of kicking a ball around when the Taliban and the length they had to go to, and the people who helped them to get out. Look, that's a serious, hell of another level ahead of the Republic of Ireland's problems and everything else we've been talking about. Yeah,
well said, Tommy Martin. Tommy and Michael Verney, thanks so much for, as always, great discussion over the last hour and a half, and have a great Sunday, and we'll speak soon.
Cheers, John.
Thanks, John. Cheers, Michael.
Cheers, Tom.
The lads on the Sunday paper review there. We're going to be back after the news, building up to the ladies' final between Dublin and Meath with Cora Staunton. Just to let you know what's going on in the intermediate finalists: Westmeath 2-16, Wexford 5 points, and Europe up in 3 of the 4 matches against the United States in the Solheim Cup, already taking a 3-point lead into this afternoon. We're back after the news with more here on Off the Ball on News Talk.
The Sunday papers on Off the Ball.